Begin with a slow, contemplative voice. Describe the village returning to routine, but nothing feels the same. The silence is heavier, the air carries the memory of the night the ancestors spoke. Speak about elders sitting longer by the fire, choosing their words carefully, and children learning stories meant to teach respect rather than fear. Describe Cato walking through the village, carrying the weight of memory, understanding that being the guardian is not about recognition, but responsibility. Emphasize that protection is not always visible, it comes from listening, remembering, and acting before danger arrives. End with a strong reflective note. Ancestors do not abandon the living, but the living often abandon the past, and when memory is ignored, history returns, louder than any drum. Use a calm yet powerful tone. Describe the drum's final silence, the echoes of its beats still lingering in the minds of all who survived. Speak about Cato, no longer just a boy, now recognized as the guardian of memory. Explain how his role is not one of glory, but of constant vigilance, listening to what the past wants the living to remember. Describe the villagers learning to respect warnings, to honor the unseen, and to pass the drum's lessons to future generations. Emphasize that ignoring history has consequences, and that remembering it is the only way to protect the future. End with a reflective, almost poetic tone, suggesting that memory and courage together preserve life, while neglect can invite disaster even when danger seems far away. Slow, reflective tone. Describe the first light of dawn breaking over Cora after the night's chaos. Speak about smoke curling from extinguished fires, the quiet of a village that survived by the ancestors' will, and the trembling villagers stepping out to see what remains. Explain how relief mixes with shock, how gratitude and guilt settle over the elders who once dismissed the warnings. Describe Cato walking among them, observing both devastation and survival, understanding that the village's continued existence is fragile and sacred. Emphasize that lessons learned in fire and fear leave a mark deeper than any wound. End by hinting at the silent drum, now quieter than ever, as a reminder that protection comes from listening as much as action. Start with a tense, rising tone. Describe how the wind suddenly picks up, carrying the whispers of the ancestors across the village. Speak about how the raiders, previously confident, begin to hesitate, as if the land itself resists their presence. Describe the vibrations of the drum echoing through every street and hut, filling Cato with both fear and hope. Explain how shadows twist and the environment seems alive, not with magic, but with memory defending itself. Convey the chaos and confusion among the attackers, their weapons shaking in unsteady hands, their shouts swallowed by the night. Emphasize that this is not a miracle but a manifestation of ancestral vigilance. Speak about how the village, guided by the unseen, begins to feel safe even in danger, and how Cato realizes that respect for the past is as important as courage in the present. End with the idea that when ancestors intervene, their power is felt, not seen, and the living must listen or risk devastation. Narrate the arrival of raiders from the dark forest. Describe the sound of their footsteps, the glint of weapons, and the cold intent behind each movement. Emphasize the stark contrast between the sleeping village and the advancing shadows. Speak about Cato watching, heart pounding, the drum's vibrations coursing through his body as the ancestors' warning manifests in real danger. Explain the terror, confusion, and sudden clarity that grips him. The living, the unseen, and the past collide. End with a suspenseful note, an acknowledgement that the ancestors' intervention is beginning, and the moment of survival has arrived. Slow, deliberate
there?
tone.
I have
Describe
to get out of
Cato
here.
approaching the ancient drum,
Please
fear
help me.
quivering in every muscle, his hands almost shaking. Explain the sacred rule never to touch it, and how breaking it could bring consequences he does not yet understand. Speak about the memory of his grandmother's warning, her eyes full of urgency and wisdom, and how those words now echo in his mind. Emphasize that courage in this moment is not born of pride but necessity. Describe the drum under his hands, rough and worn yet vibrating with unseen life. Convey the tension, the gravity of touching something alive with history, and the heartbeat-like rhythm that responds to his touch. End with the sense that this act, forbidden though it is, may be the only way to protect the village from the calamity foreseen. Introduce a tense, almost whispering tone. Describe the moment the ancestors' visions overwhelmed Cato. Speak of fire spreading across distant huts, villagers fleeing in terror, shadowy figures of raiders moving through the forest. Explain how the ancestors communicate not with words, but with images so vivid they cannot be ignored. Describe the smell of smoke, the cries of children, and the rivers running dark in his mind. Emphasize how the visions feel like reality pressing in from all sides, a warning that cannot be postponed or misinterpreted. Speak about how Cato trembles, torn between fear and responsibility, yet cannot turn away. Convey that in this moment, time slows, the past and future intersect, and understanding comes with both clarity and terror. End by stating that once such visions are seen, ignorance is no longer possible, and every decision that follows carries the weight of survival. Speak slowly,
The fire speaks
letting
of
the
times
weight of
long
isolation
past,
sink in.
and our stories
Describe
keep it alive.
Cato standing alone under the silver light of the blood moon, knowing what others refuse to accept. Explain how it feels to carry truth while the rest of the village sleeps in blissful ignorance. Describe the chill in the air, the stillness broken only by the drum's relentless beat, echoing through empty streets and deserted pathways. Emphasize how loneliness magnifies both fear and clarity, how the burden of knowing what is coming rests heavily on a single heart. Explain that in moments like these, one's courage is tested not by the presence of danger, but by the silence of those who should have helped. Use imagery of shadows stretching long across mud huts, of Cato's breath visible in the cold night air, and of the drum's vibrations running through his body, warning and guiding simultaneously. End with the idea that history is shaped by those willing to act alone, even when the world turns away. Narrate Cato running to the elders' council with fear shaking his voice. Describe the elders' calm faces, their amused smiles, and their refusal to believe a child. Explain how authority often mistakes age for wisdom and pride for certainty. Emphasize the pain of speaking truth to those who refuse to hear it. Speak about how warnings are often rejected not because they are false, but because they are inconvenient. End with the realization that wisdom ignored becomes regret remembered. Describe the blood moon rising slowly into the sky, staining the land with a color that feels wrong. Speak about how animals sensed danger before humans did. Dogs howled, birds fled, and the air grew heavy. Describe how the drum's rhythm changed that night, beating faster and louder, filled with urgency. Emphasize the feeling that time itself was running out. Explain that some nights are marked by the sky, and ignoring them is a mistake history repeats. Build tension by describing villagers waking with unease but refusing to understand why. End by stating that the ancestors were no longer whispering, they were warning. Introduce Cato with warmth and quiet strength. Describe him as a boy shaped by loss, someone who learned early that silence can teach more than words. Speak about his grandmother, the last true guardian of the drum, a woman whose eyes carried both kindness and fear. Describe how she taught Cato that ancestors never shout, they whisper, and only those who slow their hearts can hear them. Explain the lessons she passed to him at night, warning that one day the drum would beat with urgency, and that day would demand courage, not permission. Describe her death as the moment belief became Cato's inheritance. Emphasize his loneliness after her passing, how belief isolated him in a village that chose comfort over memory. And by highlighting that faith often survives longest in those who have lost everything else. Begin with a reflective and slightly regretful tone. Explain how fear does not disappear suddenly, it fades slowly, quietly, until people no longer notice its absence. Describe how, in Cora, the drum continued to beat at night, year after year, yet nothing visible seemed to happen. Speak about how villagers began to sleep through the sound, how parents stopped warning their children, and how elders who once believed started calling it an old tale meant to scare the young. Explain how repetition can turn danger into background noise. Emphasize that humans are skilled at normalizing what should never be ignored. Describe gatherings around the fire where laughter replaced caution, and how comfort slowly took the place of respect. Speak about how people trust what they can see, and dismiss what they can only feel. Build the idea that most disasters are not sudden, they are invited by disbelief. End by stating that forgetting a warning does not make it false, it only makes its consequences closer. Begin by painting midnight as a living moment rather than a time. Describe how the fires in Korra slowly fade, how insects quiet, and how the air thickens with stillness. Speak about the exact moment the drum begins to beat, softly at first, almost uncertain, as if asking whether anyone still remembers how to listen. Describe the sound traveling through the ground, through walls, into sleeping hearts. Emphasize that this is not noise, it is a message shaped like a heartbeat. Describe children turning in their sleep, elders waking with unease, animals crying without reason. Explain how fear arrives before understanding, how the body recognizes danger before the mind accepts it. Build tension slowly, letting the listener feel the weight of the warning. End by suggesting that when something ancient chooses to speak at midnight, it is because daylight has already failed to protect the living. Speak with reverence,
The smoke rises
as
well
though
today.
introducing a living
Yes,
presence.
the fire is strong. The
Describe
stew
the
will be
ancient
ready
drum
soon.
resting inside the hut, carved from sacred wood taken only after prayer and patience. Explain how its skin was stretched during a ritual meant to invite ancestral spirits, not entertainment. Emphasize that this drum was never played for joy or celebration, it existed for moments when human voices failed. Speak about how it was once guarded by chiefs and spiritual leaders, struck only when danger approached or balance was threatened. Describe its surface, dark, cracked, marked by time, yet still alive, still breathing with unseen life. Explain the belief that the ancestors live within its rhythm, waiting silently until the living forget who they are. Emphasize that the drum does not speak in words, it speaks in vibration that travels through bone and blood. Describe how those who heard it long ago said the sound felt like truth knocking from inside the chest. End by stating clearly that the drum never beats without reason. When it speaks, it is because the past has seen what the future is about to suffer. Lower your voice slightly, as if approaching something forbidden. Describe the abandoned hut standing at the edge of Korra, far from laughter and far from firelight. Explain how time has bent its wooden walls, how the roof sags under the weight of years, and how shadows seem to settle inside it as if they belong there. Speak about how children are warned never to go near it, not with anger, but with fear wrapped in silence. Describe elders passing the hut with lowered eyes, their footsteps quicker, their voices softer. Explain that the hut is avoided not because of monsters, but because of memories too heavy to face. Tell how this hut once held something sacred, something meant to protect the village, but protection always demands sacrifice. Emphasize the belief that some places are abandoned not because they are empty, but because they are full of truths the living are afraid to remember. Describe the air around the hut as colder, heavier, as if it waits. Slowly introduce the idea that inside this hut rests an object that does not sleep, does not age, and does not forgive neglect. End by suggesting that ignoring such places does not weaken them, it only strengthens what they hold. Begin with a calm, grounded tone, as if your voice is rising from the earth itself. Describe the land of Korra as ancient beyond counting, a place where the ground has witnessed generations come and go without ever forgetting a single step. Explain that in this land silence is not emptiness, it is memory resting. The wind does not simply pass through the trees, it carries names, regrets, prayers, and promises spoken long ago. Speak about how elders believe the land listens, how the soil remembers blood spilled in injustice and tears shed in secret. Describe the village as quiet not because it lacks life, but because life here has learned respect. Fires are lit carefully, words are chosen slowly, and nights are honored as sacred. Explain that stories are not written in ink but carried in breath, passed from mouth to ear so they remain alive. Emphasize that the people of Korra believe the dead never truly leave. They step back into the unseen and watch, waiting for the living to remember who they are. Build the atmosphere patiently, letting the listener feel that something ancient still listens from the shadows. End by hinting that when a land like this chooses to speak, it is not out of anger, but out of warning, and warnings are never given without reason.